Guy Illouz was a sound technician for some of the biggest bands in Israel. Today, the sound check for his funeral procession.
The
26-year-old was shot by Hamas fighters at the Nova Festival, brought into Gaza critically wounded, held in Al-Shifa hospital and died soon afterwards. On Monday, 2 years later, his body was released. No sound checks required in his hometown for this stereo sentiment.
Why she have to die so young? So I can't understand this.
Last night, the bodies of 4 people were released by Hamas and brought to the forensic center in Tel Aviv. But one of the bodies was not that of a hostage.
3 deceased captives have been identified at the National Center of Forensic Medicine. Staff Sergeant Tamir Nimrodi, Uriel Baruch, and Eitan Levy may they rest in peace. They joined 4 deceased captives who were identified yesterday here: Guy Illouz, Bifin Joshi, Yossi Sharabi, and Captain Daniel Peretz. May they rest in peace. The remains of the 4th body that arrived yesterday from Gaza Strip is not associated with one of the deceased captives.
The future of the ceasefire and the fate of thousands of people could now depend on the scientific work being done in this center. During a previous exchange, Hamas handed over a body they said was that of a hostage, which turned out to be that of a Palestinian in Gaza. Now, if that sort of thing starts to happen this time round, it could actually derail the entire process. Last time round, the correct remains were handed over to Israel eventually. And in the last hour, Hamas has said they will hand over 2 hostages' bodies tonight. The text of the current ceasefire deal acknowledges that the location and identification of bodies will be difficult, but given the levels of distrust here, everything becomes more fragile.
Hamas, the terror organization, is required to uphold its commitments to the mediators and return all of our hostages as part of the implementation of this agreement. We will not compromise on this.
In Gaza, the bodies of dozens of Palestinians were returned by the Red Cross, released by Israel. Work to identify the deceased is ongoing. The setting, what's left of Gaza's health system. This afternoon, the funeral procession of Guy Illouz made its way along the highway to Tel Aviv, guards of honor on the overpasses, and finally to the Ra'anana cemetery. His father Michel arrived, surrounded by the embrace of a community who'd been waiting for this funeral for a long time. During the eulogy, he addressed the condition his son was returned to him in and spoke to Guy directly.
עמדתי בהבטחתי, הסתכלתי עליך, נשמתי אותך בפעם האחרונה, וכן, נשארתי אותך במצח, והצלחתי לראות את היופי שלך, גם במצב שבו חזרת אלינו. אוהב אותך גלייטות שלי, בני בחורי אהובי, תנוח על משכבך בשלום.
The end was a dignified affair for Guy Illouz and his family. Something so many others during this war can only dream of.
Now, Israel has now handed over the bodies of 90 Palestinians to Gaza's health ministry. Its forensics team says some of the bodies were still shackled and they bore signs of torture, like many of the Palestinians who were freed on Monday. The UN says the Israeli military continues to kill civilians around the lines its troops withdrew to. Harry Fawcett has this report, which contains some graphic images of injury.
Gaza's people have suffered through 2 years of Israeli bombardment, but since it stopped, there are other stories of suffering now being told by those who are taken from Gaza and held in Israeli custody. In December last year, an Israeli ground incursion targeted the Kamal Adwan hospital in the far north, calling it a Hamas stronghold, detaining its medical director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, and more than 200 others. Among them, 28-year-old Mahmoud Abu Foul, who came home to Gaza as part of the mass release on Monday. Home, now a tent, with a mother and brother he'd longed to see again, but now cannot. He lost a leg in an Israeli strike in 2015. He says his lack of mobility meant he wasn't able to leave the hospital, where he'd been seeking refuge when it was stormed.
After my arrest, they transferred us inside the Israeli territories to detention centres, where I was interrogated. I was beaten and tortured, and as a result of this, I lost my eyesight. The blows were mainly on my forehead and the back of my head.
It happened, he says, at the notorious Sde Teman detention centre. He says after one beating, he was left unconscious for 2 hours.
When I woke up, I couldn't see well, and soon after that, I completely lost my vision. The treatment was extremely bad and harsh. There was no medical care at all. They only gave me eye drops and ointment.
We put his accusations to the Israeli military. It has not responded. Like Israelis, Palestinians in Gaza are welcoming back the dead as well as the living. Israel returned 45 more bodies to Gaza today via the Red Cross. Our sources in Gaza suggest some of them were Hamas fighters killed inside Gaza at the beginning of the war. Others were blindfolded and handcuffed. Others bore marks suggesting they'd been run over by tanks.
The occupation forces had placed some of the bodies in refrigerators. Some of them are clearly identifiable, while others are difficult to recognise. We are waiting for the Red Cross to give us the names of these 45 martyrs.
And there were 2 more Palestinians killed today. The Israeli Air Force reportedly carrying out an airstrike in eastern Gaza City, in what Israel defines as a prohibited area near its military positions. Hamas is also killing Palestinians, engaging in gun battles with armed gangs, executing those it calls Israeli collaborators. President Trump says he's okay with that for now, but insists they will, after a period, disarm or be disarmed. For now, Hamas is in charge in the territory Israel has withdrawn from, promising to hand over more Israelis' bodies tonight, while emphasizing the difficulty of locating remains in the ruins. Next to the ruins, there are some signs of recovery, markets being replenished, bakeries reopening, but deprivation is everywhere.
There are no homes at all, there's no shelter, nothing. We wake up in the morning and look for a sip of water to drink. If we want to eat, there's no money and no work to do. This isn't a life.
The UN says more still than the 600 trucks a day being promised are now needed. Israel now reported to be preparing to reopen the Rafah crossing from Egypt to Gaza to both trucks and Palestinian citizens tomorrow.
Well, joining me now is Arab Barghouti. His father is the Palestinian political leader Marwan Barghouti, who is currently still serving 5 life sentences in an Israeli jail. He is described by his supporters as being the only leader who could win an election outright amongst Palestinians. Thank you for joining us. At one point, it was thought that your father would be released. Can you tell me what happened?
I think what happened that the Israeli government has made it very clear with a clear statement and an announcement that they don't want a political solution. They just want the cycle of violence to continue on this land. I think that everyone understands that my father represents a political solution. He's someone who has been a supporter for a political solution, a 2-state solution for decades now. We've talked about this a few weeks ago. And this is exactly what the Israeli government doesn't want. Since he's been in prison, more than 800 Palestinians have been released with life sentences, with more, as you know, according to them, more security complicated cases. But with my father, they refuse to release him because he has a political vision that is, first of all, accepted by the Palestinian people, trusted by the Palestinian people, but more importantly, accepted by the international community. They don't want
I did ask David Mencer, the Israeli government spokesman, about your father's case a few days ago, and he said Marwan Barghouti is no Nelson Mandela. You know, he is a multiple convicted criminal.
I mean, a government that has faces like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu, I don't think that they're eligible or qualified to come and, to evaluate people. My father has been called the Palestinian Mandela for the struggle that he's struggled for the Palestinian people. And as I said, he has a very clear political vision. It's not like he's hesitant about his political vision. He's been talking about it for years and years. And I think that it's very clear that the Israeli government is trying to punish the Palestinian people overall because they're not interested in a political solution. They're only interested in having us outside of Palestine. So, the Israeli government has been working for more than 2 decades for the character assassination against my father. So it doesn't make me feel anything when an Israeli spokesman says that about my father. You need to ask the world leaders.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is speculation or hope that there may be elections for the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian government, within the next year or so. I mean, is it your father's wish to contest those elections and to be released in time?
I will have to wait until I talk to him. I haven't talked to him in 3 years. I think that knowing him, in a few years ago, when we were supposed to have elections, he declared and announced that he will be running for president. And I think that this is an encouraging thing. You're talking about someone who's, again, trusted by the Palestinian people, and we haven't had a trusted leadership for a very long time. I think elections are very positive towards the Palestinian people and the Palestinian political system overall. We need more youth in power. We need more women participation in power. We need leadership that we actually trust. So it's not only about my father, but my father represents that voice that is reasonable by the Palestinian people. And I really hope, as someone who hasn't even voted before in my life, it's my dream that we have elections as soon as possible and we get to choose our leadership.
Is he someone who could also reach out to the leaders in Gaza if he was allowed to communicate? Is he still effectively cut off at the moment?
Yes, he hasn't been able to. We haven't had any access to him in years. In 3 years, we haven't been able to talk to him as a family. But the lawyer has been able to see him only 5 or 6 times. And yes, I do think that he has the legitimacy and moral authority to be able to bring and build the bridges between all Palestinian factions and to have political partnership between all Palestinians. And unity has been always his political legacy. If you go back to the prisoners' document in 2006, he brought every single Palestinian faction, and until today, it's the only signed document by all Palestinian factions. And that stated clearly that the Palestinian state will be built on the 67 borders. Resistance should be limited to within the 67 borders, and the targeting of civilians should be forbidden. So he is someone who is capable of taking political initiatives that are reasonable, accepted by everyone, and that's exactly why this fascist government fears him.